Hello and welcome to Oil and Gas 360. I'm Dan Genovese with EnerCom, joined today by Drew Lichter and Zane with Mobius Risk Group. They're going to be presenting Wednesday, April 19th at 10:55 a.m. Central Time, as well as a panel at 2 p.m. Central Time at EnerCom Dallas. That's being held at the Crescent Hotel in Uptown, Dallas. Mobius has been a valuable conference sponsor for EnerCom, and I know a valuable partner and information resource for many of the companies presenting at the conference. And we thank them for supporting EnerCom and our independent open investment conferences. I want to encourage everybody that's watching to register to attend EnerCom Dallas at www.enercomdallas.com. Want to welcome you guys to the program, and I'll kick it off by asking you to tell us a little bit about Mobius, and then give us an overview and highlight of what's going to be covered in the presentation and then the panel in the afternoon on Wednesday.
Yeah, so thank you, Dan. We appreciate you having us on and look forward to seeing you in person in a few weeks. So I think to understand what Mobius does, we got to look back 20 years to our founding. We were really started to bring transparency and accountability and capabilities to corporate clients and upstream producers, midstream producers, large end users of energy, because we found there was huge asymmetric information where a corporate client or an upstream really was at the mercy of either the mid-marketers or the merchants. And they were sometimes being treated fairly, but sometimes not. And so we come from those backgrounds, either front, middle, or back office. Through the years, we've leveraged technology to where at this point, I would say we're one part technology company that's informed by the experience of the team. And we do all come, front, middle, back office, quantitative, fundamental analysts, traders, originators, structurers from large institutions. But now we work on retainer in a non-conflicted way for corporate clients. So it's technology is informed by our experience. And then we leverage our own capabilities by using our own technology. So it brings us scale, and it really brings, a lot of velocity to our clients, and that speed that we're able to deliver results, as well as the amount of capabilities we can bring. So we're active in physical markets. We're active in financial markets. We're very active in oil and gas and traditional energy. We're also active in industrials, which is really my space, metals primarily, but really across that spectrum. And now we've become much more involved in renewables and carbon in those markets as well. So we're excited to be there. One of the fun things about our job is looking at the big picture of where things are going to go, just structurally over the next 20 or 30 years. And one of the things that Zane and I have talked about, quite extensively, is the difficulty of exporting natural gas in the form of raw material, but the ease with which you can export it as a finished good. And that's something we feel like has been, really missed through, through a lot of the analysis that's out there. And, coming originally from an energy background and seeing what happened, even just with the ethanol boom in the US, which was much smaller than a steel and aluminum and all petchem and ethanol, and really all the natural gas, intensive manufacturing that we feel like for a lot of reasons is going to be moving back here over the next 20 or 30 years. Driven in large part by the people who are going to be in this conference and the cost-effective energy and clean energy that they produce. We feel like that's a story that hasn't been told, and hopefully we'd like to bring some value to people, because we're not making 2-month decisions. We might on occasion, but when you're talking about an asset divestiture or acquisition or a facility or an LNG loadout, you're looking at 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. So we want to give people perspective around that, because we feel like the state of play that's been in the industrial economy for the last, let's say the last 50 years or so, is a lot of that's going to change. And we're already seeing that, but we're just at the tip of the iceberg, in our opinion.
So that will be, the topic that we'll cover in our afternoon panel discussion. Drew and I, as members of the same team, are happy to agree to disagree at times too. So it should be a lively discussion where we'll bounce some ideas back and forth, welcome some questions from the audience, because we're only as good as the exchange between our clients. While we are certainly experience and technology driven, at the end of the day, it's understanding our corporate clients' goals, needs, risks, capacity limitations, whether that be on the credit side or even on the just the intel side. So it'll be a true discussion, or at least it's meant to be.
Yeah,
that's right.
I'll just ask you, Drew, when you talk about easier to export finished goods versus LNG. Kind of describe that just a little bit more, so that folks that are going to be attending can understand, maybe your thesis around that.
Sure. So I'm not going to get into the LNG side of things too much. I can get into it with industrial folks, but with the folks who are going to be attending EnerCom, I'm probably in the 100 dumbest people when it comes to the science around how that happens. But it's hard. It's expensive, it's hard, and it's dangerous, and nobody wants it in their backyard. What's easy to do, what's easy to ship overseas is a coil of steel. You put it on a barge, you put it down to a port, you put it on a bulk freighter, and you ship it. What's relatively easy to ship is, albeit a little bit tougher, would be, some of the chemicals that are produced with natural gas, fertilizer, and et cetera, right? So a lot of the industry that's gone away from the U.S. and taken away oil and gas demand, natural gas in particular, and power burn in particular, over the last 40 years, for a lot of reasons, we feel like it's coming back. So number one, people drastically understated the operational risk of outsourcing everything to an unfriendly country. I think people, or let's say competitive countries, because we'd like to be friends with most people anyway. Certainly would like to be friends with China, but they're a competitor. And for us to export our metal supply chain to a country that we have not just political but military tensions with is insanity. So that needs to come back here for that reason. And when you look at Europe, Europe's in the same boat, only Europe's natural gas is a heck of a lot more expensive than ours. And we don't see that problem getting solved anytime soon. It'll be solved to an extent. But right now the lights are on and gas prices aren't $100 because they turned to coal this winter. They're not going to do that. They'd much rather lose their industry and send it over here, right or wrong. They'd rather lose their industry and have us do it than do it over there with coal. So when we're looking at that, and I don't mean that as a political statement, it's just what it is. So you've got that. You've got the carbon border adjustment coming out of the EU, which is going to make it very difficult for stuff coming from Asia, because particularly when we're talking about metals products, it's much more carbon intensive to make it in Asia than it is to make it here, for a lot of reasons that I'm happy to talk about with anybody who wants to get into the details, but probably won't get into the details on our presentation or our panel. But that's the second reason. And then the third reason is just from a pure military perspective, it's got to be local. Supply chains need to be local. So you put all those reasons together, and we're going to have our industrial supply chains to a large extent coming back here, not in total, nor should they come back in total, but you've got to have enough that you can rebuild your military. And people forget, we had almost no Navy after Pearl Harbor. The Japanese Navy was much more powerful than ours. We won World War II because we were able to build, I think, and I might be misquoting this a little bit, but we built about 10 times as many ships as they were able to build because we had the industry. So we went from a relatively small military in 1940 to the most powerful military machine in the world in 1943 because we had industry. So people look at the standing military and say, that's your power. It's not. It's your industrial base and your technology base that's your power. We've got the technology base. I think we're making good strides towards bringing some of the chip manufacturing back here. We certainly have it from the engineering perspective, although it gets stolen a lot, but we still have it. But the industry we don't have, and we're bringing it back, but it's got to be here. And if it's not going to be here, if it's going to go to a less expensive location, it's Mexico. Perhaps a little bit will be in Vietnam, but do you really want to look at what's happening in the South China Sea? If you're a company in Germany, for example, that needs to now outsource some heavy manufacturing, do you want to trust that you'll be able to ship to the South China Sea in perpetuity without interruptions? I mean, I wouldn't. I might put a little bit there, but I'm going to hedge my bets. And the good bet for your hedge, it's somewhere in the Americas, and primarily it's North America or Mexico, probably a lot in Texas. But if it's Mexico, it's still U.S. gas demand. So that's where we say, why are we going to all this effort? And we should be liquefying natural gas and exporting, and we should be drilling as much as we can. As long as there's coal in use, we should be drilling as much gas as we can possibly get out of the ground from an environmental perspective, if no other reason. But you need those finished goods as well. And it's way easier to build a factory here and ship the steel than it is to try to ship liquefied natural gas to Europe. And frankly, with the cost to do that, they're not going to be cost effective to produce it anyway.
Yeah. So Zane, we'll let Drew take a breath, and I'll ask you to weigh in on the topic and the subject, and some of those things that Drew just discussed.
Yeah, I think I would distill it down to a really simple point, that being the geographic concentration is a material risk. in all commodities and all finished goods that the world is coming to appreciate in maybe a greater degree than we've seen in many decades. You know, while it was at one point in time all about large-scale world wars, now it can be as simple as a regional conflict that disrupts supply chains, you know, whether that be what the world lived through in 2020 or that being what we're seeing now with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. But the geographic concentration of energy, labor, finished goods, and in some ways they are all the same, is something that we would like to address in the panel discussion.
Yep.
Yeah, that'll definitely be valuable for those that are in attendance, and certainly looking forward to it. I want to, you know, as we wrap up, any last things that folks need to know as they're making their registration, preparing, you know, their travel for coming to the conference? Anything else they need to know as to why they should attend that presentation as well as the panel?
I just real quickly wanted to touch on the panel discussion, which we have, or sorry, on the presentation, which we haven't covered yet. The presentation, a short 25 minutes that will focus on really what we see as today's primary volatility drivers in the energy markets in North America, and for that matter, the world, and that being the really a material shortage of refining and natural gas storage capacity. You know, we've seen prolific gains in North American supply, and of course, price solves for it, so thus demand as well. But we've seen little to no change, and if anything, we've seen a backpedaling in refining capacity and storage capacity. So we'll touch on how that's occurred, what changes would be required for that to go away, and as like cliffhanger, it's not likely to. So then, you know, the relevance for the audience will be, what do we do about it? So, you know, with the background that we have that Drew's touched on, it's really given the audience some thoughts around how to prepare for and live through and succeed in a hyper volatile environment.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to hearing from you guys on these topics. We know with what we've gone through over the last several years, every one of those points were made during, you know, kind of the 2020, 2021, 2022. So looking forward to hearing that. Again, I want to encourage everybody to register to attend the conference. Make sure you're planning around attending both the presentation and the panel. They'll be on Wednesday, April 19th. The presentation is at 10:55 a.m. Central Time, and the panel's 2 p.m. Central Time at EnerCom Dallas. Guys, thank you for joining me, and look forward to seeing you here in a couple of weeks down in Dallas.
And thanks for having us. Look forward to it as well.
Yep. Thank you, Dan.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too.